She sat on the kitchen floor. Not a chair. The floor. Cold tile, both hands wrapped around a cream-colored envelope with embossed lettering, the kind of card that announces itself before you even work up the nerve to open it. In the living room, her 14-month-old daughter was stacking cups in her playpen, narrating every single move in that steady, beautiful stream of baby nonsense that is somehow the most grounding sound in the entire world. And she just sat there, on the floor, not crying. She was past crying. I want you to hold something before we go any further. Have you ever given someone everything, your money, your time, your complete and unguarded faith, and watched them walk away like you were nothing more than a chapter they needed to get through? Not an enemy, not a stranger, someone who looked you in the eye and said, "I love you," and meant it. Someone who had nothing and leaned on you and let you hold them up. And then, the moment they had everything, chose someone else. Hold that feeling. Don't answer it yet. Just hold it, because this story lives inside that feeling. Every single word of it. But before we go 1 second further, I need you to understand something. This is not a betrayal story. Not exactly. This is the story of two people who loved each other, genuinely and deeply, and were both too afraid to say it out loud at the right moment. And before we are done, you are going to hear both sides. Because the truth, the full truth, only makes sense when you are willing to hold all of it at once. If you are new here, welcome to Earned Love. I am really glad this found you. Go ahead and hit that subscribe button right now, because this is the kind of story we tell on this channel. No filters, no neat endings, just the truth of what people do to each other and what it costs. You do not want to miss what comes next. Let's go back to the beginning. My name is Audrey Oliver. I am 34 years old, and I live at the end of Birch Lane in Millhaven, Tennessee, population 12,000, give or take whoever packed up and left last spring. Millhaven is the kind of town where people wave at cars they don't recognize, where the pharmacy doubles as the gossip exchange, where everybody has a theory about everybody else's life, and nobody is particularly shy about sharing it. I grew up here, buried my mother here, and for 9 years, I lived next door to the man who quietly dismantled every plan I had made for my own life. His name is Weston Pruitt, Dr. Weston Pruitt, now. When I first met him, he was 22 and flat broke, carrying a duffel bag and a letter of acceptance to Vanderbilt Medical School like they were the only two things he owned that mattered. He had rented the house next door from old Mr. Frazier, who charged $300 a month and fixed absolutely nothing. Weston showed up in late August, all long arms and nervous energy, and knocked on my door asking to borrow a dish towel because he hadn't unpacked yet. I handed him 2. He returned them 3 days later, washed, folded, stacked neat. That was who he was back then, someone who paid careful attention to the small things. We became friends the way people do in small towns, slowly, and then all at once. He came over for dinner when school ground him down to nothing. I sat across from him at the kitchen table and quizzed him on pharmacology flashcards until his eyes glazed over. Some nights he fell asleep on my couch with a textbook open on his chest, and I would turn off the lamp and let him sleep. No fuss, no explanation needed. By the end of his first year, we were not just neighbors. We were something harder to name. I want to stop here for just a second, because there is something worth saying about small kindnesses, about the folded dish towels of life. We have been trained to pay attention to the grand gestures, the proposals, the surprises, the expensive, well-documented proof that someone cares. And in doing all of that, we walk right past the things that actually reveal who a person is. The returned favor, the quietly kept promise, the person who shows up without being asked and leaves things better than they found them. I have spent years thinking about what first made me trust Weston Pruitt, and every single time, I come back to those dish towels because they told me who he was, or who I believed he was. So let me ask you something. When was the last time someone returned something borrowed, with care? And how much did that quiet little thing mean to you? Now I need you to hear his side of this, because what Audrey may never have fully understood is that Weston Pruitt was terrified of her. Not in a bad way, in the way you are terrified of something that feels too good to be trusted. She was the first person in his adult life who helped him without keeping score. And for a man raised to believe that nothing ever came free, That terrified him far more than any anatomy exam. Weston grew up in a two-bedroom house in rural Kentucky with a mother who worked double shifts at a diner and a silence where his father used to be. Medical school was never supposed to be possible for someone like him. A partial scholarship and 2 small grants got him through the door, but they did not cover everything. The gap between what he had and what he needed, rent, books, equipment, food on the week's account hit 0. That gap would have ended everything before it ever truly began. Audrey stepped in. It started quietly. A don't worry about it when he could not cover his share of a grocery run. Then, a loan. She insisted on calling it a loan when his car broke down days before a clinical rotation he could not afford to miss. Then the cost difference on a required medical kit. Then, by his 2nd year, help with rent in the months when scholarship funds arrived late. He kept a ledger. Every dollar written down. He was going to pay her back. He always meant to pay her back. But the money was never the whole of it. Audrey was the first person who made him feel like he deserved to get where he was going. She never looked at his struggle like something to be managed or quietly pitied. She looked at it like it was part of the story, and she wanted to be in it. The night before his board exams, she stayed up with him until 2 in the morning, not quizzing him, just sitting across that kitchen table, her tea going cold, her presence saying everything out loud that neither of them had said yet. I believe in you. I am right here. By his 3rd year of medical school, something between us had shifted, quietly, the way seasons change before you think to notice them. There was a night, in late October. Weston had come home for a long weekend, exhausted and fraying at the edges, the way he got when Nashville had wrung everything out of him. I made chili and cornbread the way my mother used to, and we sat on the porch until midnight, talking the way we always did. But that night felt different. He was looking at me in a way he had never quite looked at me before. Or maybe he had, and I had always been the one to look away first. That night, I didn't look away. I won't go into details. Some things deserve to stay private, and this is a family channel. What I will tell you is that it was not a mistake. Not to me. Not for a single second. 3 weeks later, I was staring at a positive test at 6 in the morning, crying in a way I could not immediately explain, happy and terrified and unspeakably alone, all at the same time. I told Weston. He drove down from Nashville the following Friday. Pale when he arrived, pale when he left. He sat at my kitchen table, held my hands, and told me he would do whatever I needed, that he was not going anywhere, that we would figure it out together. He said every right thing. He said them like a man who was already disappearing in real time. He went back to school. He called. He came home for the ultrasound. He showed up, and then showed up a little less, and then existed in my life only in the thinnest technical sense. Something had shifted inside him. I could feel it the way you feel cold air from a window you cannot find. I had our daughter on a Tuesday in June. I named her Rosie. She has his eyes and my stubbornness, which my mother would have found absolutely hilarious. Weston held her for a long time in that hospital room. I watched his face change. Watched something crack open in him, something good and entirely real. He kissed her forehead. Then he kissed mine. And he said, quietly, "She's perfect. You're perfect." I believed him so completely that I never asked the question I should have asked out loud. Where do you see yourself in 5 years? Where do you see us? Let me ask you something that might be uncomfortable to sit with. Is it possible to genuinely love someone, fully, completely love them, and still not choose them? Is staying silent, keeping things beautifully vague because naming them feels too risky? Is that its own kind of harm? Weston loved Audrey. He will tell you that himself, but he never said it out loud, never crossed the line, never handed her the full truth of what she meant to him. And Audrey, she loved him back, funded his entire future, and never pushed him to say what he felt, because she was afraid too. 2 people, both in love, both terrified, and silence sitting between them like a third person at the table. Does any part of that sound familiar to you? Now, Weston. When Audrey told him about Rosie, the world went very still. Not in a bad way, in the way that everything suddenly feels weightily, undeniably real. He was 25, halfway through medical school, carrying $70,000 in debt, a future he had bled for, and a woman who had made that future possible standing in front of him, holding a test, looking at him with eyes that were asking something he did not yet know how to answer. He showed up. Every weekend he could manage. The ultrasound, the birth, the first exhausting, tender, disorienting weeks. He was there. What he never did, and he has turned this over more than anything else in his entire life, was say it plainly. Audrey, I love you. I want this to be what it looks like. I am choosing you. He was afraid of failing her twice, once as a man and once as a doctor who had not yet earned the right to take care of anyone. So he stayed present without committing. He was there without ever choosing. And there is a word for that, and the word is cowardice, and he owns it. Then he met Cordelia Pemberton Graves. She walked into a corridor at St. Augustine's Medical Center during his fourth-year rotations, her father's hospital, as it turned out, and asked if he knew where the attending's office was. He pointed her in the right direction. She thanked him and kept walking. That was the entire beginning. What followed happened slowly, and then all at once. Cordelia was brilliant, composed, and certain of herself in a way Weston found both intimidating and, if he is honest, restful. She carried no uncertainty, none of the beautiful, terrifying openness that defined everything about Audrey. Being with her felt like standing on solid ground in a way he had not realized he was desperate for. He knew exactly how that sounded. He knew it then, and he knows it now. If this story is already finding something in you, if you recognize any piece of what you just heard, drop a comment and tell me whose voice is landing harder right now. And if someone in your life needs to hear a story like this one, share this video with them. Sometimes the right story finds people at exactly the right moment. Rosie was 14 months old when the card arrived. Heavy cream envelope, embossed lettering, the kind that announces itself before you open it, before you even fully understand what you are holding. I stood at the mailbox for a moment longer than I needed to. Then I walked inside, sat down on the kitchen floor, and opened it. Dr. Weston Pruitt and Miss Cordelia Pemberton Graves request the honor of your presence at their wedding. I did not cry. I want to be clear about that. I had already spent too many nights crying about Weston Pruitt to have anything left over for his wedding invitation. What came instead was something colder and strangely steadying, a clarity I had not expected, like a fog finally lifting off something that had always been there, waiting. In the living room, Rosie was in her playpen stacking cups, narrating every move in that little steady stream of sound that is the background music of my daily life. And I sat on that kitchen floor, card in both hands, and just listened to her. Let her voice fill every corner of the room while everything else went quiet inside me. 3 weeks before that envelope arrived, Weston had been home. He came for Rosie's first steps. I had called him the moment she pulled herself upright on her own, because it felt like the kind of thing a father should witness in person. He drove down that weekend, sat on the living room rug, and held out both hands while she wobbled her way toward him. She made it. 3 whole steps. He caught her and laughed in a way I had not heard from him in months, full and unguarded and completely real. Then he looked at me over her head. Something unreadable in his face, something that felt, for just a second, like a door opening. He was already engaged when he looked at me like that. He did not say a single word. I need to ask you something, and I want you to sit with it honestly. Have you ever loved someone deeply and still moved towards someone easier? Not better, easier. Someone who came with their own certainty, their own stability, and being with them meant you never had to show up to the raw, uncertain, exposed places inside yourself. Because that is what I believe happened here. Audrey knew everything about Weston. His debt, his fears, his history, his silence. She carried all of it without being asked. Cordelia was a clean slate. And sometimes, when someone has known us too completely for too long, a clean slate doesn't just feel like freedom, it feels like relief. Even when what we are actually doing is running from the weight of being fully known by another person. Now, Weston, he should have told her in person. He has known that every single day since the card went out. He convinced himself it was a kindness, formal, private, something she could sit with and process on her own terms, without him standing there waiting on her reaction. He told himself he was giving her space and dignity. What he was actually doing was protecting himself from having to watch her face when the words landed. He called the night he knew she would have received it. She picked up on the second ring. She said, "I got it." And then there was a silence between them that had never existed before, not in 9 years of friendship, not across all the late nights and shared meals and careful unspoken love. A silence with actual physical weight, the kind that settles into your chest and stays there. He said, "I'm sorry, Audrey." She said, "Don't be. Be happy. Be good to her." And she hung up. She sounded like a woman who had already said goodbye weeks earlier and was simply completing the paperwork. If you have ever been on either side of a moment like that one, if you have ever been the one holding the phone or the one who hung up, I want to hear from you. Drop a comment below and tell me where you landed. And if you are not subscribed yet, do that right now. Because what happens over the next 5 years of this story is not something you want to walk into without the full picture. I want to tell you what 5 years of rebuilding actually looks like, because people always skip this part. It looks like waking up at 5:30 to a little girl who needs breakfast and has strong, non-negotiable opinions about which cup is the right cup. It looks like long Saturdays at the park and grocery runs where Rosie names every item she passes and always pronounces spaghetti wrong in the exact same charming way, every single time without fail. It looks like saving money slowly and deliberately, taking a night class at the community college to finish my accounting certification, learning, bit by careful bit, that a life can be full without having the shape you originally built it around. Weston and I had an arrangement. He paid child support, unfailingly and more than legally required. He visited Rosie on scheduled weekends and certain holidays, and he showed up in those moments in a way I genuinely respected, even when I resented everything surrounding the edges of it. He never missed. I gave him full credit for that. He married Cordelia. They moved into a house across town, and life in Millhaven closed quietly around all three of us the way water closes over a stone, smooth on the surface, cold underneath. Then, in the spring of Rosie's 5th year, Cordelia died. A car accident on Route 9. March. She was gone before the ambulance arrived. I heard it from my neighbor Margaret before I heard it from Weston. I sat with the news for a long time before I felt anything at all. And when something finally came, it was not what I expected. Not relief. Not the quiet vindication that, in my most honest moments, I will admit I had once or twice allowed myself to imagine from a safe distance. What arrived instead was a hollow, unexpected grief for a woman I had never truly allowed myself to know. And underneath that grief, something I can only describe as a low, steady fear of what came next. I need to be careful here, and I need you to be careful with me. Because there is a story that writes itself in situations like this one. The return, the grief, the woman who held everything together while he was gone. The reconciliation that feels like the universe finally correcting a long overdue mistake. I want to push back on that story. Audrey did not spend 5 years waiting for Weston to find his way back. She built, she healed, she raised Rosie and reconstructed herself from the inside out, and she was not a woman holding her breath for anyone. Weston's grief was real, but real grief is not a currency. It does not purchase what was lost. It does not entitle a person to anything they walked away from. And yet, when two people who love each other are finally stripped of every reason they were afraid, something becomes possible that simply wasn't before. Not justice, not a clean reset, just possibility, which, if you have ever stood at that particular edge, you already know is its own kind of terrifying. Now, Weston, grief, he will tell you, does not arrive the way you expect. It looks like phone calls and arrangements and a week spent moving through other people's carefully worded condolences and front porch casseroles. It looks like a house that is suddenly, permanently quiet in a way that has actual physical mass to it. His marriage had been good in many ways and complicated in others, as all marriages are, and now it existed only in the past tense. That finality, that absolute and non-negotiable permanence, was something he had no framework for. 3 weeks after the funeral, he called Audrey. He said he needed to see Rosie. Not on a scheduled weekend. Just soon. Just now. She said yes, without hesitation and without conditions, and he drove to Birch Lane on a Saturday at noon. Rosie came running out the front door in rain boots and a sundress, because that is exactly who she is. And she barreled straight into him and said, "Daddy, I have something to show you." Like no time had passed and no tragedy had touched any of it, because she was 5 years old, and 5-year-olds are a mercy that way. Audrey stood at the door while Rosie walked him through a rock collection she had organized by color. He watched Audrey watch them, her expression careful and layered, and carrying something underneath it that he was not yet honest enough with himself to name. She offered him coffee. He stayed 3 hours. Just before he left, Rosie fell asleep between them on the couch, sudden as a light switching off, and a quiet settled over the room that felt old and familiar and faintly dangerous all at once. Audrey looked at him and said, "How are you, really?" He said, "I don't know yet." She said, "That's an honest answer." And that was everything. 4 words from her, 4 from him. But that small exchange carried more weight than 100 longer conversations could have held. He started showing up, not in a grand way, not in a way that announced itself or asked to be noticed. Just more. An extra Saturday here, a Tuesday evening when he was passing through and wanted to take Rosie for ice cream, and I said, "I'll come too," because Rosie wanted me there, and that was reason enough. We did not talk about the past, not at first. There was too much of it, and we were both moving around it the way you move through a dark room, carefully, hands slightly out, feeling for edges before you commit to a step. He helped me install a new lock on the back door one evening. I made dinner. We sat at the kitchen table, the same table where I used to quiz him on pharmacology cards, the same table where I sat the morning his wedding invitation arrived, and we talked for 2 hours about Rosie's school and his clinic, and a book he had been reading, and a television show I had very strong opinions about. It was ordinary, quietly, achingly ordinary, and I noticed, somewhere around the second cup of tea, that I was laughing. Not politely, not carefully, actually laughing. I had not done that, not like that, in a long time. One evening in October, he asked if we could talk. Rosie was in bed. The house was settled and still. He sat across from me and said, "I owe you things I cannot calculate. I know this is not the right time, and I know I have no right to ask for anything. But I need you to know that I see it, all of it. Everything you gave and everything I failed to do. I see it." I looked at him for a long moment. "You don't owe me a speech, Weston," I said. "I know," he said, "but you deserve one." I thought about all the things I could have said, the things I had rehearsed across different nights, different seasons of anger and grief, and something that had become, slowly and without my permission, something close to peace. But what came out was, "Don't waste a good speech on the past. Save it for something that matters." He looked at me like that sentence was the beginning of something. Maybe it was. I still do not know. Now, Weston. The first time he tried to tell Audrey that he loved her, still loved her, had always loved her, had simply been too afraid to act on it when it counted. She was at the kitchen sink washing dishes. Rosie was asleep upstairs. The house smelled like the same dish soap she had always used. And standing there in that kitchen, he understood something he should have understood years earlier. This was where he belonged. He had always belonged here. He said her name. She turned around, her face open, cautious, and so familiar it made something in his chest pull tight. "I know," she said, before he got another word out. "You know?" He said, "Weston." She set the dish down slowly. "I have known what you were trying to say for 11 years. That is not the hard part." "What's the hard part?" he said. She was quiet for a moment, not cold, just thinking. "The hard part," she said, "is whether I still have the room." That line, whether she still has the room, not whether she still loves him, not whether she forgives him, whether she has the room. Because here is what nobody says enough. Rebuilding yourself after someone fills all your space and then leaves costs something real. You fill in the gaps with other things, your work, your child, your own quiet mornings, and your own hard-won peace. And when that person comes back asking for the space they used to occupy, sometimes it is genuinely gone. Not out of bitterness, not as punishment, just filled, rebuilt, different. And you have to decide whether you want to open the walls again, whether that person has truly earned the right to ask, and whether you have anything left for that kind of work. Have you ever had to make that decision? Now, forgiveness. People talk about forgiveness like it is a door, like you open it once, step through, and the matter is settled. That has not been Audrey's experience. Her experience of forgiving Weston Pruitt has been less like opening a door and more like washing a window, layer by layer. Every time she thinks it is finally clear, she finds another smear, another season's worth of old residue, and she has to go back with the cloth and work through it again, slowly, without rushing it. The hot anger cooled years ago. What took longer to address was something quieter and far more corrosive, the belief that she had simply been foolish, that a smarter woman would have asked the question out loud, that loving someone fully and quietly and hoping they would choose you back was somehow a failure of judgment on her part. Her therapist said something in her third year of rebuilding that rearranged something permanent inside her. Loving without conditions is not a character flaw. His failure was not receiving love incorrectly. His failure was not being honest about the limits of what he could offer in return. You did not do anything wrong by loving fully. He did something wrong by staying silent. The difference between those two things took time to hold. But once she could hold it, something in her finally loosened. Weston, for his part, did something concrete about the money. In his first year of residency, he set up a direct repayment, separate from child support, covering everything Audrey had given him, with the kind of interest a person with integrity would attach, spread across 6 years. She told him it was not necessary. He told her it was necessary for him. She let him do it, and she understood, without needing it explained, that it was the only way he knew how to begin carrying himself honestly again. The money was never the point, but paying it back mattered. If something in this section found a place it recognized, if any part of this landed somewhere you have been carrying, leave a comment and tell me what it was. Stay with me for one more chapter, because where Audrey and Weston land is not where you might expect. Rosie turned 6 in June. We had a party in the backyard, streamers, a lemon cake, every child from her kindergarten class running through the sprinkler in their good clothes because nobody thought to tell them not to. Weston was there. He stayed the whole day. And at some point in the late afternoon, the two of us ended up side by side in lawn chairs, watching the chaos unfold, talking with the ease of two people who have weathered something together and come out the other side still standing. At one point he reached over and set his hand on top of mine. Not dramatically, not with anything attached to it. He just set it there, and I let it stay. I am choosing not to know what that means yet. I have learned, slowly and at real cost, that I am better at most things when I give them time to become what they are going to become before I try to name them. Now, Weston. Last month, Rosie found an old photograph. Audrey and him on her front porch, laughing at something neither of them can remember now. She held it up and asked who the people in the picture were. He said, "That's Mommy and me. We were neighbors. We were friends." She studied it for a long moment, with the particular seriousness that 6-year-olds reserve for things that actually matter. Then she looked up and said, "You should still be friends." He has been turning that over ever since. He is not naive enough to believe that love surviving damage is the same as love surviving whole. Whatever he and Audrey might build, if they build anything at all, will look nothing like what he walked away from. It will be slower, more deliberate, constructed from materials they each had to go find on their own and carry back separately. It will have real weight to it. But he has learned enough by now to know that the things worth having are never easy, and that some people are worth the long road back, even when the place you return to looks nothing like the place you left. Whether Audrey still has the room, that is not his question to answer. I want to end where I started, with the question I asked you to hold at the very beginning. Have you ever given someone everything and watched them walk away? Or, and maybe this is the harder admission, have you ever been the one who walked away from someone who gave you everything? Because this story has two people in it, and both of them are telling the truth. Audrey's pain is real. Weston's love was real too. Even when it was not enough, most of the harm we cause each other does not come from cruelty. It comes from fear, from silence, from choosing the comfortable thing at exactly the wrong moment. I do not know if Audrey lets him back in. I do not know if she should. What I know is that she already lived through the hardest part and came out the other side in a backyard in June, watching her daughter run through sprinkler water in her birthday dress, whole. That is not a small thing. That is everything. Most of our stories are not finished. That is not a tragedy. That is just life on Birch Lane. Thank you for sitting with this one all the way through. If it found you at the right moment, drop a comment and tell me which voice landed harder, Audrey's or Weston's. And if you have lived either side of this story, I really want to hear about it. Subscribe if you have not already. There are more stories on this channel that deserve to find you.